Hi,
Well,
Troy love. Is it really, really, really windy by you today too?
it's been really windy. And
Yes.
in our neighborhood, it's our community does a pick up all your trash uh annually. So all the stuff that doesn't fit in your garbage can. So it's been sitting out there for a week and a half waiting for them to come, and now it's not sitting out in front of my
I,
yard.
yeah,
It's on the
yeah,
next neighbor's yard.
yeah. Or it may be in my backyard now because it might have blown from Yuma to Phoenix because like honestly, it is something else. But
Mhm.
so Troy, we have a question. How
Oh,
can I heal? Oh, this is a great one from attachment wounds that I don't remember. I love this question. So how can I heal from attachment wounds I don't remember? I know I was abused and neglected as a child, but this has very specific memories. Oh, but I have very few specific memories. Goodness, I even have my glasses on.
yeah, that's all right. So if you've ever had an actual wound, like let's say that you cut your knee or you fell on your bike and you've got scabs all up your arm or whatever, it's not so much how did it happen that is the important thing. So it might be a really great story to say how I got the scar on my knee or something like that, but that's not really the most important part. The most important part is to recognize that I have a wound and I need to take care of it. So that's the first part. So it might actually be a blessing that you don't remember everything specific about that. But the fact that you know that it happened probably helps put some puzzle pieces together about why you've done certain things or why you struggle with certain things. So it can put some things together. There's two parts to this. Number one is, what do you end up believing about yourself because of the wounds? So you've identified abuse and neglect, even though you don't remember a whole lot. Where do those, um, what do you end up believing about yourself as a result of being abused or neglected? And where does that show up today? What are some of the, it's interesting. I had a client who showed me a post that she posted on like on a social media site that said, if you were neglected as a child, what are some of the behaviors that you still find yourself doing as an adult today? Which I thought was a really wonderful question. So even if you don't remember being abused or neglected, do you see yourself doing certain things as an adult today to try and protect yourself? Do you find yourself isolating? Do you find yourself shutting down, putting boundaries up? So that's part of it, is what are some of the behaviors that I'm doing as an adult today? What do I believe about myself as a result of those things? And what do I need today? I can't go back and change anything that happened in the past. I can change what I believe about myself. I can change some of the behaviors, and I can also figure out ways to get my needs met. So when I'm scared, when I'm worried, when I need comfort, I can find ways to get those met. And the more that I learn how to care for that in the present, the more that that wound starts to heal. And you're able to look back and think, yeah, that happened, but it's not impacting my life today. I've learned how to heal from that and move forward.
And I think that this happens so often that we don't, like there are some things that are just, horrendous that people go, oh yeah, that was the trauma in my life. But we have guys that come to treatment that, I don't really have anything, And as you're starting to unpack that, but you can have realizations. In fact, think I shared on the last webinar we did, I personally joined Troy's Finding Peace retreat. I have to recommend it for people in a certain place. It would not be when things are highly disruptive and dysregulated, because that would be very much more dysregulating. But to on a personal growth journey, I've been doing this a while, and there was still revelations for me. And I was, and sometimes I go, pardon my language, but crap, I'm tired of having to, keep working on myself. And then I go, no, it's the gift. It's the gift that I continue to do that. So my point though with this is you don't have to, be able to go, here's my list of 10 things. But I love what Troy was talking about is like, how is this showing up for you? How is it impacting your life today? And if you work on those aspects of it, then, you may have some more awarenesses or awakenings on some of those things, and be able to process through them in a different way. But man, if we all had to remember every single thing, oh my, like you said, it's a gift, sometimes to not be able to. There's a reason why I think our, minds go, yep, no, 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 I'm going to protect you from that. So, but I love that you're asking the question about that too. So, Troy, twice, well, he has on Thursdays, alternating Thursdays, a betrayed partner group that talks about the betrayal, well, not just betrayal, the wounds and the voices of shame, how all of that shows up. And then every Friday he has the addict group. So consider those. They're on our site. You can find that. And he also has a work group that will start again in April, I think, right? I think that's, I have so many of them floating in my head, but he's got the attachment wound work group. So on seeking integrity, the betrayed partner work group starts again March 1st. We have a sex addiction 101 starting March 4th. So there's lots of resources for early in the journey, but as you continue, because this is a journey, just like I had, my oh crap moments, it also is the gift of like, I don't have to keep bumping up against the things like Troy is talking about that show up in my life now. I can do something to change the messaging. He's nodding his head. Thumbs up. Okay, then we'll go on. Okay, do you have any tips to practice detachment?
That's a really interesting question. So if you hang around me long enough, you know that I like Star Wars. And in the Buddhist framework and also in the Jedi framework, they really talk a lot about not being attached, because not being attached to anything helps us reduce our sense of fear. And there's a whole theology that we could go into around that. So it kind of depends on what you're meaning by detached, because as humans, we are wired to be attached to each other. But when we put too much meaning in those attachments, that's where suffering can happen, because we all live in a world where things happen. People die, people move away, those kind of things. And those can create attachment wounds depending on how painful that was. And so it's interesting that you're asking how to practice detachment. And really it's, what is the meaning that I'm putting into this? Is, for example, if I have a partner and I think that my partner is the one and only person who can meet all of my needs, I'm going to be very unhealthily attached to that person, and they aren't going to be able to live up to that expectation, and they're going to be disappointed, and then it's going to hurt. I'm going to hurt. I'm going to feel rejected. I'm going to feel abandoned. I'm going to feel neglected because I put all of that into one person when that person does not have the capacity for that. So I have to recognize that there are, how much meaning am I putting into a particular relationship? And it's almost like recognizing the fragility of life. It's a catch-22 of, I get to have this person for as long as I get to have this person until I don't get to have this person anymore. And that can lead a lot of us to put up walls and just not connect with anybody because we don't want to deal with the pain of loss with that. And so that's a form of detachment, but not exactly what they're talking about, which is being mindful and present and being in this moment and not worrying about the past and not worrying about the future, but being in this moment and just being present with what is happening here without creating any story about what's going to happen in the future, and being able to let go of stories that I've held on to in the past. That's harder. It's easier said than done, really. But that's why we call it practice, practicing the present moment. And so it's really taking a look at what are the stories that I'm telling myself, what are the expectations that I am having for the future that may not be based on any reality other than just my hope, and how do I remind myself that this is the only moment that I can do anything about, and being in this moment, very, very present and grounded in this moment. I'm not sure that answered your question at all, but that's what comes up, is to recognize what are my stories, expectations, all those kind of things, and realize that all I have is this moment, and let me use the best of this moment.
So I'm going to tag on to that, but I'm going to skip ahead because it says, before we jump in deep, would you please give an introduction to attachment wounds? So if you want to pull up some slides or something like
Sure.
that, but I was thinking too, what Troy was talking about. I mean, it isn't about detaching from people, but rather detaching from people's behaviors. I have no control over anyone else. So I find myself, it's more I have to detach from expectations and behaviors than it is the people. Now, sometimes there are, toxic people, I unfortunately have a few people in my life that are not helpful to me, and I don't feel like we don't share a common goal of helping each other strive for becoming better people, shall we say. So there are certain people that I really have to limit, my connection with, in a real way. Some of them are, associated with family, so it makes it more challenging. Other people aren't, but for me, the detachment is like, when I start getting agitated about something, I'm going, oh, I'm putting too much energy into something else that is not going to serve me. So I use the serenity prayer a lot, and that I only have control over, myself and my actions and my reactions, and just kind of focusing back on that. And like you were talking about being present, that is, I'm present in the moment. I got, like, this is my moment. I got nothing about past or future, and I can just, work on me. So, but yeah, detaching. I know part of the codependent language is you have to detach and let them have their, and the opposite of addiction is healthy attachment. So we do want to be interconnected, not and interdependent, not independent, and not so dependent that we lose ourselves completely either. So okay, I'm going to turn it over to you for this, and then we'll go back to other questions.
Sure. Yeah, so there are 6 attachment wounds. Loss, right there. Loss happens when we have a loved one who passes away, or my best friend moves across the country, or I have to move, or I have things in my life that because of life circumstances I don't have anymore. House burning down, those kind of things where I had something and it's gone, but it's not because of any kind of abuse or any kind of intentional harm that's happening. It's really just what happens in life sometimes. But for some people, that can be a really profound loss, a wound for them. Neglect happens when somebody has needs that are not being met by somebody who does have the ability to get those needs met. So kids who's needing clothes and food, and mom and dad are gone out like doing drugs or something, and they're not taking care of the kids. That's a form of neglect. But also in a home where a kid needs love and attention, but parents are way too busy, they just don't have time for that kiddo, then can be a neglect wound. Rejection is when you're being told by others that you don't belong here, that you're not wanted, you're not going to be a part of this group, so get out, you don't fit here. Abandonment is when somebody just walks out of your life and you don't know why. There's often no closure or understanding about why they left. They're just gone. And we have to try and make sense of the hole that's now gone because they left. Wake up one morning and dad's gone or mom's gone and don't have any idea why they're not there. Betrayal is when somebody breaks a relationship of trust that you have with them. They lie to you, they cheat on you, they take credit for something that you've done, they do something that breaks that trust that you had with them, and now it's makes it really hard to trust that person, and sometimes hard to trust anybody. And then abuse is when somebody takes out their wounds out on you. So that could be physically abusive, could be sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, all kinds of abuse, but there it's an intentionality of somebody inflicting pain on you because they haven't done their own healing, and it causes some profound wounds for us as we move forward. So those are the attachment wounds. And then next to it is, well, what do I end up believing about myself when those wounds happen and keep getting hit? And I can believe that I am flawed, I'm defective, I'm no good. I could also believe that there isn't anybody in my life that I can trust to be there for me. I'm not safe, my world's not safe, or I'm powerless. Like there's nothing I can do to make things better. I'm stuck and I can't get out of it. So those two things, the wound and the core belief, really can dramatically change the way that I view the world and create a very a sense of not safe. I'm not safe and I'm not okay.
And I was thinking while you're talking, like, just on neglect, it can be uh, neglect, like somebody's working 3 jobs trying to put food on the table. So it can be for a, theoretically good reason. It can be, because mom and dad, or mom or dad doesn't, is mentally ill, or is drug addicted, or whatever. There's so many different reasons. So, some of them are, loss, like you mentioned, death, or a fire, or something, like some of it is so I mean, it's out of control. Some of it, like you said, the abuse is, more intentional, whereas I haven't done my work. But it's so layered, too. And I think, as I mentioned with the guys that come to our treatment program, they were, oh, I'm not neglected. I had that same thing. I was like, oh, I wasn't neglected. But then there just wasn't bandwidth in my family to address, some real needs of kids, and it was not through any, intentional. There was no intentionality by
Right.
parents to go, oh, we're not gonna do that. No, they just didn't have the bandwidth, and so being able to look at that as an adult is helpful, but being able to attend to those wounds, it was a gift.
Mm.
Okay, next question. 8 months in recovery, I have insecure attachment from childhood. I've heard that it is possible to create secure attachment over a 7-year period. My wife and I took secure attachment tests from her CSAT. My wife's attachment test said had to she had to me has become insecure. I'm doing the extreme version of recovery work, and things are going incredibly well. My wife recognizes this, and she's doing her own work with her sponsor. I'm not sure what I'm asking here, but I really desire to have a mutual, a secure attachment with each other, is I think the point of that.
I have never heard about the 7-year period,
I haven't either.
so I don't know if that's true or not true. I do believe that you can create a secure attachment with another person. Original theories about attachment styles, they thought that if you had an attachment style, that was your attachment style and it doesn't change. Some research has now shown that it actually depends on the person with whom you're trying to connect. So you may have a secure attachment style with one person and have an avoidant attachment style with somebody else based on the relationship dynamics that you have with that person. But the greatest part of creating a secure attachment is feeling safe. So I need to be able to know that I can trust you. I need to know that if I reach out and am vulnerable and ask for my needs to be met, that you at least will acknowledge that I have needs. And if you don't have the space or bandwidth to meet that need, that you can validate that it's still important. And you encourage me to find other healthy ways of getting that need met if you can't do that yourself, or if you can, that's great. And the more that that pattern is reinforced over and over, the more that I feel like I can trust this person and I have a secure attachment with this person. I can open up and be vulnerable with you. I can share with you my pain. I can talk to you about my shame. I can talk to you about my behaviors without the fear that you're going to leave or you're going to stonewall me, and vice versa. So it is possible to create that attachment. And it does take a lot of work. Even if we don't throw addiction into the pool with this, it's hard for a lot of couples to do that anyway. When we have addiction and betrayal stuff going on, it does make it a little more challenging, but not impossible. It just is a lot of work, and it sounds like that's what you're trying to do. So I wish you well.
Yeah, and with recovery, well, I think anything in life, we get out of it what we put into it. So, but in 8 months, great, but still very early in the process. So if you think about, depending on how old you are, like decades of maladaptive coping mechanisms and 8 months of trying to do things radically different, and it's jarring to our brains and to our loved ones and everybody else, as we're trying to do this journey. So yeah, leaning into the recovery. I was very intentional early in my journey to, I was person showing up, at lots and lots of 12-step meetings and doing my steps, and I mean doing everything I could because I wanted life to be different. And they kept telling me, if you do these things, it will be. And they were right, yay. And so I love that you're leaning in. And like I always get challenged. I love numbers, but when I see X amount of months or X amount of time, years of like, and then things magically change. And like, our minds are, have a lot of plasticity, and there's all kinds of stuff. But on some level, there's a podcast dropping, I hope this week, that Dr. Rob did with Dr. Evelyn Higgins about the neurobiology and epigenetics and stuff. I can't wait to listen to that one. But so there's some markers that we have, and it doesn't mean that we're predetermined to absolutely go down the rabbit hole with addiction, but there's some things that are going to be warning signs and things that we have to overcome. I haven't heard the podcast yet. I'm sure it's different. But anyway, but I do think if there's safety in a relationship, I'm going to lean into that, and I am going to be willing to attach in a different way than like I said, there are some people that are toxic. I'm an avoidant attachment style with those particular people, but that isn't me overall. I like to connect with people. So, but I love that you're doing the work. So both of you keep leaning in. So, okay. I'm the addict. Discovery was around 4 months ago. I'm working step 1. Can you talk about the effects of bullying on the addict? That has been coming up for me. Bullying from peers, not my family.
So bullying, the wound that's most commonly associated with bullying is rejection. So when I was growing up, that was something that happens to me a lot. And the story that I came to believe about myself was that I wasn't enough. There's something wrong with me. There's something seriously wrong with me, and I don't belong. And so once I started to latch onto, well, what's wrong with me, then I came, my shadows, which we haven't talked a whole lot about, but those voices in my head would give me a list of all the things that are wrong with me, all the mistakes that I've made, all the ways that I'm not good at this or that, or how I don't fit in, or how I don't belong with these people. And that became like overwhelming. And so then I would try different strategies. I would try to fit in with certain groups, but it wasn't authentic and it wasn't real. And so that wouldn't work. Or I would like isolate, or I'd become really depressed, or I'd numb, or I would find ways to just try and deal with the pain in really unhealthy ways. So when you're dealing with that, and now as an adult, the fear is, I don't know your fear, but I can speak for my fear, is that if I reveal things about myself to others, they aren't going to accept me. In fact, they're going to taunt me. They're going to make fun of me. They're going to belittle me. And so even though I may not have any evidence to support that with my spouse or my partner because they haven't done that, the fear is I've had lots and lots and lots of people who've done that to me in the past, my peers, people who I was hoping would be kinder to me. And so that fear of being rejected then holds me back from revealing myself showing my emotions, talking about some of the behaviors that I've done that I'm ashamed of because I'm afraid you're going to reject me and probably abandon me too. And so that can really affect our ability to like do a full disclosure, our ability to be honest with our therapist, our ability to be honest with our partner, because the deep fear is, I'm going to tell you something that's going to be so bad that you're just going to think I'm the most despicable human on the planet. And so that's what I think the effect of bullying can have, is it really amplifies our fear of having somebody ridicule me and belittle me again.
Yeah, and I can imagine that the addiction, like taking away the addictive behaviors, all of those things are coming up for you. And it is why, we talk about this as a process, cognitive behavioral therapy to stop problematic behaviors, and then, addressing those underlying issues, and those wounds. So getting support, like there's lots of techniques, but I have I have a suspicion that there could be some body, things coming up for you, that you may want to do some trauma work on those just specific things, not, globally on things. It's very early in the process yet, but just to kind of, give you some breathing room with those things. And it, and there's so many issues in our world and things like that, but man, bullying, is just, steals the life out of people. So but to me, you are a person that's working on being a different person, and you are on a journey. So regardless of what the voices of negativity and bullying said, you're here. You are on a different path. You are working on being a different person, a better person. So I applaud that. And it doesn't take away the bullying voices, but hopefully you can focus on having, Troy talks often too about, what are those voices telling me? Maybe you need to pull that slide up, but what are those voices telling me? And thank you. And now I'm going to do something different. I think just acknowledging that that's a bullying voice, but you don't have to lean into that. Okay, next question. And any resources on how to move from an unhealthy attachment with a partner due to my own childhood trauma to reforming a healthy attachment? How do you change what could be unhealthy attachment or trauma bond to becoming healthily attached? And it looks like this one is continued. I think this might be the continued one. My CSAT says I'm disorganized attachment style based on my assessment. I have a lot of childhood trauma and ended up married to an SA, and now have an unhealthy attachment since my support system with the past 13 years has just been my SA husband.
So I'm going to try and read between the lines a little bit, or extrapolate what I've seen happen in other situations similar to that. Oftentimes when we get into a relationship, the dynamic is we really believe like our partner should be the one and only person who should help us get our needs met. And so we don't make friends with a lot of other people. We don't build social groups. Oftentimes the social groups we have died off. I don't know how long you were aware, it sounds like 13 years. When you become aware that your partner has a sex addiction, that can actually create more isolation, because of some of the stories of like, well, I've chosen to stay with my partner. What is everybody going to think? They're all going to think I'm stupid and an idiot and I should just leave. And so the fact that I'm staying, like I'm going to feel judged from there that way. People are going to judge my partner and think that he or she's a creepo, or and they're not going to want to have anything to do with me. And so that those wounds of rejection, abandonment, abuse, all of those kind of wounds are like being hit, or the fear of being created in this relationship, which if we don't learn how to reach out and talk to other people, really can create a lot of fear. So the disorganized attachment style is like, I don't I don't know where to go. Like I have some needs, but I don't know where to go. And sometimes I'm really secure, and sometimes I'm really afraid, and sometimes I just want to just have everybody like leave me alone for a while. So part of that is recognizing that you already come from a place of childhood trauma. So you might have several of those attachment wounds of loss and neglect and abandonment and betrayal and abuse and loss. You may have all of those already. And you brought those into your relationship with your partner, who also probably had some of those wounds. And so now new wounds have been created between the two of you, but you also have the old wounds that you keep bumping up against. And so you talked about like trauma bonding, which is um, I I keep turning to the person who keeps hurting me. I keep turning to the person who keeps hurting me, and there's a bond there. And now I'm building a connection, partly because where else am I going to go? If I've cut off all the other people in my life, where else am I going to go? What is the fear of where I'm going to go? So there's a lot around that whole thing. But the bottom line is, part of the reason why we do these groups and we have the drop-in groups is because we want you to build connections with other people. So number one, you don't feel so alone, that you can learn that you're not the only partner who has a disorganized attachment style, and that it's okay, and that you can learn how to start believing that you're enough, which then enables you to have stronger boundaries, to be able to learn how to ask for what you need in a way that is heard, and the other person is hopefully learning how to be empathic, and together you learn how to have a healthy relationship. Because it doesn't sound like, I mean, I don't know much about your partner, but it doesn't sound like the people in your life growing up modeled that for you very well. So where in the world were you going to learn that if the people in your life didn't model that, and now you're an adult and you're trying to figure that out, and both of you have been wounded, it might require some help. So I love that you're seeing a CSAT and working on some of that stuff to heal some of that trauma and learn new ways to show up for yourself, to advocate for yourself, to say no, to ask for your needs, to have compassion. That's what makes a healthy relationship. But it's going to take some time. But I love that you're working on it.
And if you have not already done so, please join the drop-in groups on our website. That, those are places to connect with other people who are in a similar situation. Find some hobbies that have nothing to do with addiction and recovery repairs that you just like to do, and meet some different people so that you start creating a friend circle that is not so like Troy was talking about, it's not all of my all of my energy is on this one person. um uh, I was thinking, thank goodness I have lots of friends. I would be way too much for my husband to deal with if he had to be my only source of support. So no, he's grateful that I talk to the dog a lot, so I use up a lot of words talking to the dog every day, so he doesn't have to hear all of them. So
Um, on the website, they have a link for some books and resources for that. Dr. Rob has Prodependence. Dr. Eddie Caparucci has a book about healing the child within. Like, so there are some resources to learn about like ways to break the trauma bond and be able to step into a more prodependent, more interdependent relationships with each other. So that's another, you asked for some resources, that would be a great place. And then we have all the drop-in groups, especially for betrayed partners. Those are also a great place to go.
yes, I'm putting links in the chat, but yes, all of them, can be. I put some direct links in, but you can, yes, absolutely get to them from there. Next question: what is enmesh relationships?
All right, so that's a weird word. Like for like 10 years in as a therapist, I didn't even know how you spell the thing. Um, but okay, so think about it as like Myrtle, the nosy neighbor across the street, and she's always looking out her window, and no offense to anybody called Myrtle, but and she's always like in your business, always like looking at what's going on and over that, except that Myrtle lives with you. And so instead of having the barrier of the street, like Myrtle is there. And so in an enmeshed relationship, I know everything that you're doing. I'm looking around, like I'm very curious, I'm very nosy, like what's going on. You don't have a whole lot of privacy, and you might be doing the same thing with me. And so I don't know where I end and you start. And so because of that, I don't know who I am. And so oftentimes the way that I behave is I'm really afraid that if I do this, it's going to make you mad, or I do things to try and make you happy, because I see myself as not the independent from you. Like we're together. And so enmeshed is like, like that. So you think of that on one side of the spectrum, like you think about growing up, and did your family, like they knew where everybody was all the time and they were in everybody's business and you didn't have a whole lot of privacy and and everything was that way? Or did you live in a very disconnected family where nobody talked to anybody and everybody did their own thing, and there was no collaboration, everybody was just thrown out to figure out what they're going to do themselves? So you think about it like as a spectrum. And so anywhere along that spectrum, somewhere in the middle is probably healthy. But on these extremes, enmeshed can happen. So in addiction, enmeshed relationships can show up because out of my fear that you're going to act out, I'm going to be all up in your business. I'm going to install software on your phone to figure out where you are. I'm gonna do all kinds of stuff as a way of figuring out what you're doing, and it's all because I'm really afraid. And I want you to share every nitty gritty detail with me about what's going on in your life. And again, it's all based on fear. I want to do that. And then the other person, if they do that and they comply with everything you're asking, they lose sight of themselves. And so both of us are now just trying to be one person, and I'm trying to manage you and you're trying to manage me. And instead of kind of separating and letting us each be our own person with our own needs and wants and fears, and talk about it in a different way. So that help you understand what enmeshed relationships are.
And I was thinking, I mean, one of Dr. Rob's most popular podcasts was with Dr. Ken Adams, who talks about mother enmeshed men. There are a number of clients who, it isn't automatically if you're a mother enmeshed man, you're going to be a sex addict, but there is a correlation, because that primary relationship has been hijacked. And so differentiating and being able to love someone else and be connected with another person is a betrayal to the mother, relationship. So it's complicated. There is a podcast, on sex, love, and addiction. But it's that really unhealthy space. I mean, you were talking about, yes, in a betrayed partner who is looking, safety seeking, is going to have a tracker. I mean, they're going to do all of those things. But at some point, if we're setting healthy boundaries, and Gavin Sharp did a webinar. I can send you the link if you want it. But on why addicts need healthy boundaries. It's important for everyone to have healthy boundaries, and that space to be, an individual, but also come together, in a real and meaningful way. So. And I also, it happens, occasionally. Dr. Rob does a lot of expert consultations, and it's hard to identify, if a couple really is enmeshed, then it's hard to identify how to help them, because they're like this one unit, and while that sounds lovely to be, oh, we're together, but no, we're still individuals, but we come together, but we still have, we still have our own being. Okay, next question. How can I be sure that I have correctly identified the core beliefs that I have from attachment wounds?
So I don't know, you have to get it 100% correct. Like, I think there's we have mentioned, but we haven't talked about the shadows of shame at all today. But there's
We
the
have time if you want to pull them up.
good.
Honestly, we have time right now. So go for
Okay.
it. So,
Well,
because I think it'll be helpful for this.
we have the judge who tells us that we have to do it right. But let
I
me,
know that's what I was laughing about with this.
yeah.
How can I be sure that I've correctly done this? So,
So let's just brainstorm for a second. When your wounds are hit, and when I think you said, because you have neglect and abuse. Okay, so let's just take a look at neglect in and of itself. Oftentimes, the core belief that gets created when somebody has a neglect wound is, I'm not worthy of your time. I'm not worthy of your attention. I don't matter to you. And the belief about others is, if I reach out to you, you're going to be too busy. So people are too busy for me. So just those may not be yours, but those are pretty common for neglect. I'm not worth anyone's time, and nobody's going to make time for me. And there's nothing I can do to make them want to spend time with me. Those three genres of core belief. That may not be exactly what it is, but is it close? And really, it may be being able to determine, oh, dang, this is what my neglect wound feels like right now. What am I believing about myself and this person? And asking me that, because it may surprise you in that moment. With abuse, I wasn't worthy of being protected. I was used as a punching bag. So I don't have any value. I must have done something bad to make my person do that to me, whatever that is. So those core beliefs, and I can't trust anybody. People are going to hurt me. That's the core belief about others. And there was nothing I could do. There's nothing I can do about it now. Those same three genres can show up that way. So it's really just brainstorming and figuring out which ones kind of fit. So it doesn't have to be exactly right. It's really like, when my wound is hit, what do I end up believing? Because I'll tell you, like, if you're having a good day and your wounds are not being hit, those core beliefs probably aren't running active. So that's the first part of that. And then what happens is once that story starts going, you're going to have some shadows of shame that are going to show up to try and help you deal with that. I gotta see, where are they? I'm gonna have to download them again. So give me a second. But but those shadows of shame will show up and they'll amplify the core belief that I already have. So it doesn't have to be precise. It's really more of a curiosity of, okay, what am I believing about myself right now? And what can I do about it? Is there anything that I can do about it to make things better? So helpful, not helpful?
it is helpful. I was thinking though, while you're talking about the core beliefs, like those are negative core beliefs, but you said like if you're having a pretty good day, those may not be activated. So like, but I feel like, can I be changing my core beliefs to go, I am a worthwhile person? So I don't have to lean into the negative. It's kind of like the attachment styles. If I do the work, I can more often connect in a real and meaningful way, have secure attachments. So if I'm working to change those negative messages, I can have more days where I'm using, I'm a worthwhile person, I have value, I'm whatever the positive core belief is, rather than, but I know for sure, for me, as soon as I get poked on one of those wounds, or I have low bandwidth or whatever, it's like those messages are so quick, like they're just like poof, they pop right up. So being able to do something different with them, is how we can shift the message.
So
But go ahead.
yep. So let me share with you the 6 shadows of shame. The first 2 operate on the spectrum of appraisal. So you think about like getting your house appraised or your jewelry appraised or something, like there's somebody there who's saying how much this thing is worth, right? So that's what these two do. The judge basically appraises you as worth less. You are not of quality and you have defects and flaws. And if you could just fix those, then you would be enough. So the appraiser is walking around your house and saying, well, you know, there's something wrong here with this, you know, your yard, and this room needs to be fixed, or, you know, this jewel, like there's a chunk in it. So that really diminishes its value. But if you got that fixed, your worth would go up. That's exactly what the judge is doing. Like, you've got to work hard. The challenge with the judge is no matter how hard you try, it will never be happy. So always going to point out that there's something else wrong and you got to fix that. On the flip side, though, is the royal, who tells you that you're worthy of everything. You're entitled to certain privileges, and you're better than everybody else. And you're like the most precious gem on the entire country, in the entire world, and therefore everybody should just like bow down and worship you and do what you say. And a lot of people, when I introduce the royal, they're like, oh, I don't have one of those. And I think you would actually be surprised about how much the royal shows up, especially when we look at our addictive behaviors. Oh, I deserve that. I look at those Girl Scout cookies and I deserve those. And then I eat them and it's not usually good. All right.
But they were good in the moment, right?
Yes. All right. The next set works on the spectrum of image, or how we want to be seen by others. So the politician is really worried about me not being approved of by other people, that you're not going to vote for me, basically. You're not going to like me. So the politician will tell you things like, don't tell anybody that you've made any mistakes, cover it up, hide it, minimize it. Don't let anyone see that you're having any of these issues, because if they find out, it's going to be really bad. And the martyr really feels like you are responsible for taking care of everybody else. You have to be the superhero. You can't say no. You have to take care of everybody else. Your needs don't matter. And as long as you can take care of everybody else, then that's great. And if you can do it in a passive aggressive way, that's even better from the martyr's perspective. And then the last three have to do with power. And so we have the impotent one, who tells you you have no power. If you think about Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, nothing you do ever is going to matter. I don't even know why you bother trying. It's just going to be pointless to do that. And then the rebel, which basically says, screw that. You can do whatever you want. You have ultimate power. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. And it doesn't matter if it's illegal or hurts other people's feelings or breaks a promise. None of that matters, because you can do whatever you want. So those shadows show up when our wounds are hit as a way of trying to protect us from further pain. The challenge is, if we listen to them and we do what they say, it usually creates more chaos and more pain in our lives rather than healing. So it's just being aware of those. So when I see your question and you say, well, how do I know I correctly identified them? Your judge was like, well, you better get it right, dude, or else it's just not going to work out. And the more loving response is, as if I am get in the ballpark, that's probably enough. I can do a lot with that, and I can heal a lot, even if it's not exactly the right core belief.
Well, so continue, like if the judge or whatever is showing up, how do you address that?
Oh, so you notice who's talking to you, and then you call it out. Hey, judge, I see you. Hey, hey, impotent one, I see what you're doing. And then you ask it a question. So I really have you imagine that they're standing outside of you instead of being inside of you. That's one of the tools for this. And then you ask it. So, hey, judge, what wound are you trying to prevent me from experiencing right now by telling me that I don't measure up, that I'm not enough, that I'm not trying hard enough? If you actually listen for a second, it kind of has some overlap with IFS, internal family systems, kind of similar trend. If you listen, it will tell you, well, I don't want you to be hurt. I don't want you to be rejected. I don't want you to be abandoned. So if you could just like be perfect, then nobody will reject you anymore. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you for trying to take care of my rejection wound. You're lousy as it, but I'm pretty good at it myself. Let me go find a way to take care of that rejection wound in a healthy way. Whether that's reaching out and telling somebody I need to just hear that you love me, or I do some act of self-compassion for myself, I'm going to find another way to take care of this rejection wound rather than listening to my shadow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next question is 5 months into my recovery, working step 4, timing wise, when do I work on inner wounds, attachment issues, bubble to the top on the list of what to work on?
So I have a Pathway to Peace program that's like a year-long recovery program for men. And usually it works really well after they've gone to, like, if they've needed to do inpatient. It's not therapy, it's a coaching program. But before we dive into the attachment wounds, we do a lot of like mindfulness work, a lot of grounding work. So if you're looking at doing that, the underpinning for me of addiction really is attachment wounds and trauma. That really is. But if I get my guys to jump right into doing that work right away, then I'm setting them up for failure because they have no tools to know how to stabilize and ground themselves when we start bumping up against those wounds and poking them around. So although it might be insightful to know what your attachment wounds are so that you can be aware of what those are, that's partly why the first 3 steps are the surrender and recognize that I can't do this by myself. I need to reach out for some others to give you some skills for that. I'd say the same. Like, I need to learn how to recognize when I'm triggered. I need to learn how to do some grounding. I need to learn how to regulate my emotions a little better, and then do a deeper dive into the attachment wounds, inner wounds, those kind of things. You can be aware of them, and I think it helps to make sense of why, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I love that you're working on step 4. I mean, steps 4 through 9 are where we really do the cleanup, and it really sets us on a course for a recovery journey. But I'm also going, this is a journey, and I know I'm an addict. We all want it. Like, if we do these things, is it all going to be better and we're going to feel better? But oh, sorry, but regardless of what we do, there's still going to be triggers and all of that stuff. So trust the process. Hopefully you're working with a really good sponsor as part of all of this, and a good therapist, and the more you lean into, somebody earlier mentioned, they're doing a lot, for their recovery. So you can't do too much early in the course to get that foundation, and having the right foundation. I don't take things out of meetings, but I'm going to share this little tidbit. I was in my personal meeting not too long ago, and somebody had relapsed, and he said he was a 1, 2, 3, 12er. And so he did steps 1, 2, 3, and then he did step 12, where he's doing service and everything else. And he neglected to do all the important things. Guess what? And he'd been around a long time. But I thought he never got to have the finding peace that you really do get if you do the work. And he relapsed. And unfortunately, I haven't seen him since I've been back. I haven't seen him coming back. So I hope he's just going to other meetings. But I really encourage you, lean in, do the work. Steps, again, 4 through 9 are such it's a process, and everybody goes, oh, I'm afraid of doing step 4. But man, that was where I left, all those voices of shame that Troy was talking about. My shame dial way down, after I worked through that. Then it was tolerable, and then I could continue the journey. Uh, so just understand that it's a journey. This is a lifelong, and you'll have more awakenings and more learnings, and you'll keep peeling the onion back. And again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I wish it was like, oh, I'm all done and I'm all wrapped up with a bow. That isn't the case, but the benefits of continuing to do the work, continue to, like I said, I went to Troy's retreat. I could go, well, I'm so much sober. No, I have more work to do, and I want to feel more peace and more serene and not get tripped up by stupid stuff that, so I'm willing to do the work. So, okay. Do you have any guideline on doing a finding peace book study? Love you, Troy. I agree. But do you have an outline for? Yeah, I mean, I know that because somebody that I did the retreat with, said they were doing a book retreat. So do you have somebody, or do you have a process for that?
Well, so I know several people across the country who have done their own. Some of them do it online and some of them do it in person. A couple of things that I'd recommend is you do it at the same time every week. I would recommend having some kind of a check-in, a very brief, just to kind of give everybody a chance to check in. And then if you're doing the book, in the book, it's only 8 weeks, but if you were actually going to do it as a book study, it might take a lot longer than that. If you're going to actually do everything that's in the book. So for example, the week 1 covers all 6 attachment wounds. So what you may do in your book study is for one week, we're going to do loss. And then we're going to talk about rejection, and we're going to talk about, and you spread it out that way. The other part is to ask people to have a commitment to come, and also confidentiality. I think that's, I'm just reiterating, you probably know that, but to have a commitment, if you said, hey, let's do this for 3 months, or we're going to do this for 6 months, you set a timeline and ask people to be committed, because otherwise people will kind of drop off. I get that life happens every once in a while and people sometimes have things happen, but really have a commitment of people to come, because you're going to start sharing vulnerable stuff with each other. And if people are not serious about coming, it won't create safety. So those are a couple things.
Yeah, I think that that's really important, but I also think having a finite time so people know what they're signing up for, it really helps if it's, and I put in the chat, Troy has a 6-week course for men, to work on these things. And so it's a 6-week course, 90 minutes, per week. So it's very specific, so people do know what they're joining. So we are basically out of time. So thank you all for joining us and all the great questions. Troy, as always, it's great to see you. Now, next month, check the calendar, because Kristen and Troy are switching weeks. So pay attention on the website. Well, it's just come anyway. It's all good stuff. So whoever is going to be there, I'll be here. So thank you. I'll talk to you soon, Troy, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Okay.